The civil war that's been brewing behind the scenes over at Disney for the last several weeks is really starting to heat up as the shareholders meeting gets closer, and both sides are basically trying to make their arguments to the shareholders on why you should vote for their respective board members. On the one hand, you have Bob Iger, who spent a lot of time cultivating his board and made sure that he only brought on people who will basically do exactly what he says. And on the other hand, you have Nelson Peltz, who just wants to have 2 of the board seats in order to have some diversity of thought in the room when they're making all their major decisions. And Nelson Peltz has been accusing Bob Iger and Disney of basically making the company go woke, which is why the company has been failing at the box office for the last several years. Nelson Peltz, the activist investor agitating to win 2 Disney board seats, criticized the company's woke strategy, specifically questioning Marvel's Black Panther and The Marvels, which featured black and women leads respectively. And to be fair, the article does go on to say that Black Panther did gross over $1.3 billion globally, and while The Marvels was a huge financial failure for the studio, probably costing them hundreds of millions of dollars, the prequel to that, Captain Marvel, did still gross over $1 billion globally, but that was largely due to the fact that it was sandwiched between the release of Infinity War and Endgame, so a lot of audience members who may not have been predisposed to actually watch that movie felt like they had to watch it in order to understand what was going on in Endgame, and that really did help boost the box office results. Iger, speaking last fall at the New York Times Deal Book Summit, acknowledged that Disney Productions should focus on storytelling rather than advocating particular agendas. Creators lost sight of what their number one objective needed to be. We have to entertain first. It's not about messages. And the thing is, Bob Iger has said this exact same thing numerous times in the past. They always try to push their messages in their movies over at Disney, and he's even said as much that they want to actually push their messages, but as the movies fail, then he'll come out later on and say like, oh yeah, we need to focus on story now and get away from trying to push messaging. And then as new movies come out, they're pushing the messaging all the same, and then they'll fail again. Then he'll come out and just kind of do this whole song and dance number over and over again. And a lot of people are starting to take notice of this and saying like, okay, enough's enough. Get back to storytelling and stop trying to push your agenda. On that point, Peltz said in the FT interview, people go to watch a movie or a show to be entertained. They don't go to get a message. And of course, Disney's trying to frame this whole thing as disgruntled former executives trying to get back at Bob Iger and the current board at Disney. Because for people who don't know, just a quick behind the scenes, Nelson Peltz manages the Trian Partners, which owns $3.5 billion worth of shares in Disney right now. 79% of those are owned by Ike Perlmutter, who's the former executive who was in charge of Marvel Studios back during the phase 1 and 2 of the MCU. Now, a lot of people don't realize this because I think Kevin Feige was the mastermind behind the MCU, and he's only been full control of the MCU post-Endgame. Before that, he had to run all of his decisions by Ike Perlmutter, who was the president of Marvel Studios. And that was back there in phase 1 and 2, 3 of the MCU, you know, like the best time for the MCU where they're making the best movies that everyone loved. Well, that was when Ike Perlmutter was actually able to put a stop to some of Kevin Feige's worst impulses. That was until Black Panther and Captain Marvel came around because Kevin Feige was steadfast that he wanted to make those movies. Ike Perlmutter disagreed. He didn't think that those characters actually do well. Well, yes, he was wrong on that one. Those movies were successful for various reasons. But the only reason they got made is because Kevin Feige went around Ike Perlmutter to Bob Iger, and then Bob Iger had to side with Kevin Feige and essentially overrule Ike Perlmutter, and that's why those movies got made. And the reason Bob Iger went with Kevin Feige on this one is because he agreed with his agenda. He wanted to have a black superhero. He wanted to have a female superhero. Those movies happen to be successful, so he still likes to tout those to the shareholders. Never mind the fact that everything post-Endgame, he's been going along with Kevin Feige's agenda, and it hasn't been working for them, so they just try to ignore those and say like, oh, yep, maybe we've been getting too close to just pushing messaging. Maybe we should just worry about entertaining people, but never mind the fact that they don't actually do that. They've just been trying to just keep pushing their messaging and hoping that people don't notice it. But Bob Iger is now taking the other attack where he's going after Nelson Peltz and saying like, oh, well, the people he's trying to bring onto the board don't actually have media experience, not like our board members here. But the thing is, if you actually look at the SEC filings that they have, this is Disney's board of directors right here. And it has a list of like all their different skills that they have here. I'll zoom in on that a little bit so you can see better. So you have all the list of skills right there and like, okay, media entertainment experience. Only a few of the board members actually have the media entertainment experience. And those aren't the people that Nelson Peltz wants to actually get rid of. The people that he's trying to get rid of are this guy right here, Froman and Legomasino. I think I'm pronouncing that right here. And they don't have media and entertainment experience. In fact, if you actually look at the boxes that they check here, it could be filled in by pretty much everything else. So there's really offering nothing interesting to the Disney Corporation, except she brings in diversity. She has that's literally a category here. Other cybersecurity and diversity. Apparently those are just as important. He's cybersecurity. She's a diversity hire. And those are the people with Nelson Peltz saying like, hey, if we can replace 2 board members, why not these 2 people who aren't doing anything? Because the only thing that she's actually done for the company is more or less facilitate bonuses for the executives and board members. Even though they're running the company into the ground, they still get their bonuses. And Froman, he's there because his wife is personal friends with Bob Iger's wife, and that's pretty much his qualifications. They're trying to just say like, yeah, Nelson Peltz isn't qualified. They're bringing out some of their people like Michael Eisner is siding with Bob Iger, the former CEO of Disney. And then you got George Lucas, his people made a statement saying that they're siding with Bob Iger. But look at the people that Nelson Peltz has, because he actually has real investors coming out in favor of him and saying, like, why not give him a chance? Influential proxy advisor service ISS has recommended shareholders vote to put Trian's Nelson Peltz on Disney's board, saying the activist investor, with his considerable experience on other boards and fiduciary duties owed to a large shareholder group, appears best positioned to bring a shareholder's perspective to the board. Like I was saying before, this is almost like a political campaign where you have the investment group backing Nelson Peltz, but Disney has their own backers too. Michael Eisner, the former CEO of Disney, is backing Bob Iger and his people. George Lucas, his people put out a statement backing Bob Iger, but this is just how it is. It's all a matter of what the shareholders personally want. Do they trust Bob Iger or do they trust Nelson Peltz? Me personally, though, I would actually like Nelson Peltz to win, not necessarily because I trust him entirely. I just think you need to shake things up a little bit over at Disney, and you need to have some accountability, because what's been going on behind the scenes, not only at the box office, but just around the company in general, their cruise lines, their theme parks, pretty much everything's been suffering for Disney. And that's because you have Bob Iger, chairman of the board, CEO of the company, and every board member is someone that he pretty much personally brought in there who is beholden to him, who will never do anything to go against him. And that's not the best way to run a company of this size. You need to have some type of pushback on the company. Even if you don't necessarily agree with the people that they're bringing in, you have to admit that you shouldn't just have a bunch of yes men on the board who'll just do exactly what Bob Iger says, no questions asked. You need to have some type of debate and discussion about whether the decisions that they're making are actually the right decisions for the company. And that's why I think you should actually bring in some extra people to try to offer that conflicting or alternative viewpoints to different things. Now, whether Nelson Peltz will ultimately be successful remains to be seen, because you never know how the shareholders will choose to vote on this matter. What is for certain, though, is Disney is kind of worried, because these sort of things normally go off without people taking notice, but this has actually been heating up quite a bit. And like I was saying before, that it's becoming more of a big political campaign where they're having a huge show to the shareholders and like, no, we're the better side, they're the worst side, and both sides are more or less doing this sort of thing right now. So it seems like Disney is kind of worried, and they understand that what they've been doing hasn't been working for the company. Bob Iger is essentially admitted as such, but he's more or less kind of coming at the approach of, okay, things haven't been going good, but give us another chance and we will fix it. Now it's just a question of whether the shareholders will actually grant him that chance. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Do you think Nelson Peltz will succeed? Should he succeed? Or do you think Bob Iger will prevail in all of this? And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest in entertainment news. And if you can, click the like button and share the video, because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.